I am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. Today's episode is all about boundaries. How to set boundaries, how to know what your boundaries are, how to deal with your own emotions about your boundaries, how to deal with others' emotions about your boundaries, and how to deal with others who are extreme challengers to your boundaries, and more. Do you struggle with boundary setting? I think most people do. Do you often say yes when you mean no? Ouch. I have a very special guest today who is very passionate about the topic of boundary setting. She is Sarri Gilman. Sarri is a psychotherapist, author, and workshop presenter. She also has a TEDx talk called Good Boundaries Free You. Sarri loves knitting and cross-country skiing, and she's also the mom of 4 grown children. Boundaries are invisible structures that help us have healthy relationships, yet many of us struggle with them. Please enjoy this fantastic interview with Sarri Gilman. I have to tell you that I have such admiration for you. I don't know you, but I like you and I love you. Your energy, it's just wonderful. And when I invited you to the podcast, I was waiting for 2 emails from 2 different people. And the 2 emails came at the same day. One was yours, saying yes, and the other one said yes too, but such different way of saying yes, and the tone of the message and the way it was written. I shared with a friend, I'm like, this is the difference. You can tell who the person is just by this simple 2-line email. How people...
wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Powerful, Anna. That's a powerful observation.
Yes, I read that the other person is pretty famous, like a very big person, famous, written books. Like, I'm like, wow, this is so interesting.
Well, we're all just people.
Yeah, that's what I love about you. Your humor, your wit, and your depth. It's just, I don't know. And yes. Okay.
Well, I am so honored to be invited, Anna. Thank you so much. And thank you for diving into my work so that we can make this productive. And I am very grateful, and I really appreciate any chance there is to kind of spread the word on this kind of work and how it can help people. So that's really what I'm all about. So thank you.
Oh, great. I'm excited as well. So you live on an island. What island and where?
I live on Whidbey Island, which is in Washington State, and it's north of Seattle, and you have to take a ferry boat to get here, but the ferry boat ride is only 15 minutes. And it's a very small community that I live in.
Oh, wow. I have been in Seattle, believe it or not, and I wanted to take that, maybe not that particular ferry ride to go to an island, but we couldn't for some reason. I don't remember why. This was many, many years ago. But Puget Sound is there, right? There is
yes, that's the water that surrounds me here. Puget Sound, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it. Okay, great.
No, that's okay. You know what? I'm originally from New York, and when I pronounce things out here, I'm corrected all the time by everybody.
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm in New Jersey. And okay.
Okay. Where in New Jersey are you?
I'm in Princeton now.
Okay. Do you like it there?
I do like it here. Yes. I mean, all I have known is when I came to the United States, that's all I have known, New Jersey.
Okay.
So this is home for me, I guess.
Where did you come from?
I came from Armenia.
Wow.
Yeah,
Mhm.
long way, long way
Yeah.
across the ocean. That was about 20 years ago. But, this is home.
Wow.
hmm
Wow. It's a big thing to move your country.
Yes, yes, it is. I only now realize that. Well, I did that when I was in my 20s. When you're in your 20s, you're more adventurous and life is a lot different than now.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, Although I know that you are very adventurous, right?
I do still think in terms of adventures, but I notice how different they are now than when I was like in my 20s. There's just this sense of, I think in my 20s, there was really no thought or fear about consequences. There was just a sense of, whatever it is, I'll work it out. Right? The future didn't feel like it could be disastrous in any way. And now that I'm older, I realize, well, there are all kinds of consequences to consider. And, so the choices are larger when I take an adventure.
Okay. Boundaries is such a hot topic these days. It seems like
Hallelujah. Can I just cheer about that for a minute? Yay. Finally.
I know, right? So, but I love the simplicity and the eloquence of your message, the way you communicate about boundaries. So I'm
Oh,
really
thank you.
psyched about this conversation. And why don't we then begin by asking you, what's your simple definition of what's a boundary?
So, the simple definition that I always think about with boundaries is it's just a yes and a no. And
Mm.
I just like to keep it that clear and that easy to understand.
So let's elaborate then. Your yeses and your nos are your boundaries. Okay.
Exactly.
But most of us are confused about our yeses and nos.
Right? I know I
Right.
make it sound very, very simple. And you would think that, well, if you're only talking about two little words, how complicated can it be? But you are right, Anna. We make this so complicated. And is it really my yes or is it somebody else's yes? Did I inherit this yes? Is it a yes that really is still meaningful to me or have I changed it into a no? It's very complicated. So even though there's simplicity in thinking about what it means, I think what it means is always changing for us too.
Mm. And where do we learn about boundaries?
Well, that's such an interesting thought because we do learn about it in our families, in the culture that we grow up in, because there's a lot of boundaries that are given to us and taught to us when we're young growing up. And those are sort of giving us the parameters of what our boundaries are, but then suddenly we grow up into adults and there really is nobody giving us all those parameters of what the boundaries are, and it's like we have to start over again creating what our boundaries are and what's going to work for us, because some of the things we learn growing up, some of that may work for us but some of that may not.
Mm. Is this notion of boundaries related to our values? If
And yes, in,
yes.
in some ways, in the larger cultural picture, we have a lot to work on around our boundaries and our values. When we talk just about individual persons, just you and I kind of working on our personal boundaries, that may be driven by some of our personal values. And sometimes we're adding in new values and growing our values or changing our values or learning something new and realizing that's going to shift my values. Like I'm no longer wanting to use plastic to put food in my house because I'm seeing all the environmental impact of plastic. So I've bought these new kind of containers, and I'm doing something new about my boundaries around how I'm using plastic. Now, do I wish we had this value everywhere on the planet right now? Yes. And that would help us with our boundaries, with protecting and taking care of our environment. But some of our values are just about what we can do, what we're empowered to be able to manage in our own lives. So yes, I do think values surround our boundaries often.
Yes. Otherwise, then how else would I know if I'm saying yes to something, right? I would be a little disoriented. Let me give you an example.
Yes.
So my daughter is in middle school. She just started middle school and it's December. I don't know any of the parents yet. And recently, some of the moms know one another. There was a group message, 3 moms. I was one of them. And one mom asked whether she could take our children to ice skating. Now, I have never met this mom. I don't know who she is. I met the child. She was in my house once. I hosted a play date, but that's about it. Never had a phone conversation, don't even know her name.
Right.
Right. And so I said, yeah, sure. My daughter wanted to go to this play date and ice skating. And I said, yeah, sure. You can pick her up and drop her off. That's okay. Then 30 minutes later, another text message. Oh, plans are changing. The girls want to go for pizza. Is that okay? I said, okay. That's okay too. And then 30 minutes later, another text message comes in. And this one flipped my lid. She goes, oh, the girls are pushing for a sleepover. Is it okay? And I'm sitting there. I'm like, boundaries. This is the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, woman, we've never met. You don't even know who I am. I don't know who you are. Not that you are a bad person or your house is not safe. I'm not even going that route.
Right.
I'm just speaking in terms of just personal relationship, right? Don't you think, like in my mind, that's a violation? Like this person has issues with boundaries. That's what I am judging from where I'm standing. Because if I don't know someone, how would I host their child in my home for a sleepover? Like this, I thought about this so much and started, having judgmental thoughts about this woman and all of that. So do you think I'm taking this too far? Is this related to boundaries?
Well, what's so interesting, Anna, is first of all, even though I talk and teach and write books on the subject of boundaries, I never tell anybody where their boundaries should be. But what I do believe is that every one of us has a different sense of our boundaries. So to this other mom, to her, it doesn't matter if she didn't know you. It doesn't matter if she's never been in your house. It doesn't matter if you've never met her and couldn't even pick her out of a lineup. she's fine with this, right? Because that's where her boundaries are. Now, for you, your boundaries are in a different place than that, which are, I want to know the mom. I'd like to be inside the house and see where the girls would be staying, just so I know what street we're on, what house we're in, right? Just some basics are important to you. Now, I will share with you that I have that similar sense of boundaries, even with grown daughters. One of my daughters was going to go away with a guy friend that she had been dating, and he got them tickets to get on an airplane and go somewhere. I was like, excuse me? I haven't even met him.
Wow.
Like, you're not, it doesn't matter to me that my daughters are in their late 20s. I still said, I would need to meet him first because I'm your mom, because that matters, because getting on a plane with somebody really matters. And so I think in this culture where it's so easy to kind of get around and maneuver, and we have technology and we have these cars and airplanes and all kinds of things. People's sense of what's a boundary for them is really different. And we have to just come from where our boundary is and say, oh, well, if she's going to sleep over, I would like to meet you first. And maybe I can just stop by the house and we can have tea or something and then kind of decide. Or, I'd like her brought home and we can pick a different day for maybe a sleepover as we get to know each other better. You know what I mean? You have options of how you're going to handle that. But I try not to judge that somebody else's boundary is in a really different place than mine, because I think that's kind of how the world is.
Yes.
I think we all have a sense of where our boundaries are, and they're all really different. And what I would love for people to learn to do is to ask. And rather than assume that you'd be okay with maybe your daughter sleeping in a place you've never seen before, I think that's a really important question to ask is, gee, I know you haven't been here. Is that something you're comfortable with or not comfortable with? Like, don't assume that everybody's boundaries are where ours are.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of common sense. And I'm like, am I the crazy one here? Of course I responded, my daughter will participate in the pizza and the other activities, but no sleepover, thank you. And she didn't push or anything. I guess she understood, or maybe she gossiped with other moms. I don't know.
Right. That's the other thing is when we clarify where our boundary is, we may not get approval from other people.
I may not get invited to other activities now. I may not, they haven't met me, but now they may judge me and say, oh, that woman, she's a little like standoffish, or I don't know what they may.
Strict or strict. Right. That's what we're all afraid of. See, this is why we struggle with our boundaries and why we struggle to state what our boundaries are or state what's a yes for us and a no for us, because we're really afraid that other people are then going to make some judgments about us and stigmatize us and categorize us, when really we're just going moment by moment, making decisions about what we're comfortable with and what we're not comfortable with.
Yeah, it's not about pleasing others, which I have done all throughout my life. Only now in my 40s, I'm learning to set boundaries and be okay with saying no and upsetting certain people and not be responsible for how they feel after I said no or declined their invitation or things of that nature.
Exactly. And you're modeling for your daughter.
Yeah, that's a great point too.
She's also learning by watching. Are there boundaries? What are the boundaries? Can mom say no? Can mom make a decision here? Or are all decisions made by somebody else's parent? Or so it's really good modeling, and to say, I was okay with these things, but I really need to see the house and know the person when you sleep over somebody's house, because if there's an emergency, I'm kind of counting on that person to make decisions. I want to know them.
Yes. And yes. So it's not about other people. Boundary setting is taking responsibility for ourselves and not we shouldn't worry about other people, but we still do. I mean, this is hard, right?
Right. And we also have to move away from making up stories in our head about what it'll mean to other people. Other people aren't going to spend as much time thinking about our boundaries as we think they do. But they've got to think of their own stuff. But if you feel judged by somebody, or you notice the next time there's a little party invite and your daughter hears about it at school and she wasn't included, you can't assume that it's because of this, that this moment was the moment when you said no to something. But we have learned in our culture that if we say no, there will be terrible consequences. And that's what we're all afraid of. And so we end up feeling like, well, I'm going to say no here and there might be terrible consequences. And we end up telling ourselves stories about how other people see us, when really that may not be it at all. I learned along the way, when I was really starting to work on this myself years ago, I learned that other people were actually admiring that I had boundaries. And I didn't know that at the time. At the time, I thought maybe they were judging me because I would say no to meetings, to a business meeting, or to early morning meetings because I wanted to be with my own children in the morning. And I didn't want to be at a board meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning when my own kids needed breakfast. And I really felt like I was going to be judged in the nonprofit community and as an executive director who didn't work as hard as the other executive directors who had meetings at those hours. And I learned later that that wasn't true, that other executive directors came up to me and would say, oh my gosh, that line that you've held on not doing early morning meetings, teach me how to do that because this is driving me nuts. So sometimes when we're setting boundaries, also imagine that other people are maybe admiring what you're doing
Yes.
and learning something from you and being brave enough to say something themselves. Like if you were in the car with a group of kids and they were like, and you were taking them to a movie and they started clamoring for pizza or Chinese food and sleepover dates, you might say, hey, this was a movie. You know, they're testing your boundaries.
Yes. People always test our boundaries.
Exactly. And we just get to bring definition. And in that moment, that other mom really was letting her daughter and the kids kind of decide where the boundary would be. And she was just calling other parents to say, is this okay? Is that okay? Because she didn't know how to say to the girls, no, the date ends at 5 tonight and everybody will go home and we can plan another day for a sleepover.
Yes, you're right. I sometimes people are afraid to even state that no. And
Right. Because
sometimes,
then what if the daughter gets angry? What if she feels embarrassed in front of her friends?
yeah. And so you end up saying yes, when in reality, your gut feeling was no. And that can lead to resentment. So I want to ask you about resentment because people who say yes, but in reality, they feel like they want to say no, which I have done many times in my life. You grow resentment later.
Yes.
Right?
And that resentment doesn't leave you. It kind of becomes toxic to you. And so when we live with that resentment, we have to dig ourselves out by starting to get true to ourselves. Because not only do you get resentment, you also break trust with yourself. Because inside of you, your soul is sort of watching you and it notices that you never listen to yourself and that you're saying yes when you really wanted to say no. And so that inner part of you, that soul part of you, realizes it can't count on you. And so it becomes more and more confusing to get connected to your truth because inside of you, you stop hearing the truth because it's sort of like, what's the point of telling you? You never listen. And so we lose trust in ourselves and we start doubting ourselves a lot. So along with resentment, we also get a lot of doubt because we stop really knowing what is really true for us.
Yes. Also I feel like with boundaries, with saying yes and no, or, you wanted to say no, but in reality you said yes. It wasn't modeled for us, right? This type of being your truth, and it wasn't given permission or modeled by our moms or society or in movies. I don't know, culture at large. That's number one. I also feel like even when we want to say no, we don't know how to communicate that. We're always like either we go to extremes, like we cry and yell and scream or get angry when we say no, right? I feel like there is a different way.
It becomes so emotional and so stormy because we are so fed up by the time we are saying no, rather than staying true to ourselves all the way through. And, I think there's a difference between, the things that we resent that are big and then kind of small inconveniences. So sometimes we negotiate with ourselves, or we say, yeah, we're going to go see the family for dinner, even though we didn't really want to spend time with them tonight. But, we're going to go see the older people and spend time with them for, what's an hour and a half? That's okay. You know what I mean? We can negotiate with ourselves a little. But there's big things where we become resentful because we aren't listening to our truth. And then we burst, or we think that the only way people will hear us when we say no is we have to sound angry, and we have to sound fierce, and we have to get really defensive around our no, when really I like saying no just as matter of factly as I say yes.
Can you give me an example, perhaps, from your life of recently saying no, or something of that nature, or how to say it in a non-emotional way?
Yeah. So, the holidays have just come, and it's, ski season is upon us here in the Northwest, and we haven't had a lot of snow, and I don't get a lot of time off to go skiing, but I have, January 1, that was yesterday, and I really wanted to go and just get up on my skis. I had a very bad injury last year and I missed the whole season. So I'm really excited about this. And we have a lot of family in and visiting, and we have been spending all of our holiday time together, really enjoying that. But I wanted to take a day off from family and from work and not entertain anybody. And it was really hard to say, yes, I know everybody's in from out of town, and we have spent days together and a whole week doing things. And I want this day to go and ski, because it's a great day to go ski, because the mountain is going to be pretty empty. And so I just said, I'm not going to be entertaining or joining into anything, because that's a day that I really want to go ski. Now, I know it could, I could judge myself and say it sounded selfish or anything like that, but I just decided that, it was okay to say I needed a day for myself.
And how did people respond to that?
Well, my husband joined me. He wanted to ski too. So he thought that was really fun. And and the rest of the family made other plans to do other things together. And we just weren't joining in for it. And to me, it felt fine. I don't know how it felt for anybody else. Nobody else reached out and said, hey, we're really angry about this. We wanted 6 days with you, not 5. But nobody said anything. And that may also be because in my family, we're kind of used to everybody being able to say what they need. So maybe at this point, people are used to the boundary word, and it's not such a big deal in my family at this point.
Yes.
Because they've read the book, they've seen me talk. This has been going on for years, this boundary work, and us learning about each other's boundaries. But I don't have to say it like, this is a big boundary for me, I won't be available because I'm going skiing. I just said, I'm setting aside that day, and it's a day for me to do some of my own self-care. And that's really important during holiday time, because during the year I work too. And I'm planning on going skiing.
Yeah, so it's good that you're clarifying. You don't necessarily have to use the word boundary, right? When you tell other people.
And I think people really struggle with that, Anna, when they first dive into recovering their boundaries, coming out of resentment, listening to their truth, and starting to do this work in their life. I think sometimes it can come out sounding very harsh.
Yes.
And saying this is, and almost sounding like it's just all about themselves.
Yes.
When really that's just sometimes the beginning steps, because I think as you get comfortable with your own yes and no and listening to your truth, you also get comfortable listening and asking about other people's truth. I spend just as much time asking other people about what's true for you, what's okay for you, what's a yes for you, what's a no for you. So it's not just me walking around the planet just talking about my boundaries. I'm interested in your boundaries.
This is a very interesting, topic to explore. Because, okay, we learn to set our own boundary, but how okay are we when other people set boundary for us? How do we respond or react to that? Are we okay with that? Or do we have the same understanding or compassion for that person, right?
Exactly. And that takes, that to me is really what boundary work is about ultimately. It's about self-care for
Mhm.
ourselves. It's about taking care of ourselves. And it's also about really acknowledging other people and what's true for them. It doesn't mean they get to control us, but it means that you come into relationship curious about, where's Anna's boundaries too? It's not just me telling Anna what's okay for me. I want to understand yours when I'm in relationship to you. And I want you to understand mine so that we really understand each other when we're saying yes and no to things.
Mm. But what if those boundaries are very drastically, disproportionately different?
That's
Ho-
often what happens to people is kind of
yeah.
they've been overrun by other people.
Hmm.
And often that happens when you've been either in a marriage or in a relationship where the rules have been, or in the family culture where the rules have been that everybody gets to boss somebody around, or you've been in a very disrespectful relationship where people really haven't been interested in what's okay for you or not. So this is very normal to also happen inside of families and inside of relationships. And the person that digs themselves out of it, sometimes has to confront a lot of conflict
Mm.
because they're suddenly recognizing that they have some needs and that this is not okay. And that they need to put the boundaries in a different place so that they're not overrun by somebody in the family. And so, what might have been okay, maybe you left your phone on all day and let people interrupt you all through your working day. And maybe now you're saying to your family, I'm going to keep my phone off. I'm not doing errands every single day on my way home. Please don't text me a list. I'll take a list one day a week when I'm going to the store. So you can give me a list then, but not a list every single day. So I always have to stop at the store. Like once you start realizing where you want to set boundaries so that you have some time in your life, or maybe you want somebody in the family to cook once a week. Maybe you want your kids to start doing their own laundry. Whatever it is that you start realizing, I am going to let other people be responsible. And I need to step back and allow them to step up. But that means I also have to hold myself accountable to the boundary I just set. So if I said, I'm no longer doing your laundry, it's something I think you can handle on your own. I'll show you how to work the machine in case you need to know. Then it's on me to never break that boundary once I've set it.
Yeah, but people have consistency issues.
People, right?
Yes, because it's a lot easier to go back and do it yourself than have a battle or a conflict over this boundary,
That's
right?
right. That's right. Because you have to only set boundaries that you're in control of.
So boundaries is really for us. It's not for other people, right?
Oh, hallelujah. You just got it. That's right. Because it's not about me saying I'm going to make my kids cook once a week. That's not a boundary,
Yes.
right? That may
Mhm.
be something you want to teach them and a way for them to learn to cook, but that's not you setting a boundary. You setting a boundary is setting a boundary on only things that you can control, which is yourself.
What are some myths or misunderstandings that you encounter, as a therapist or this expert on this topic that you can
People
speak
aren't
about?
ready for the pushback. So
Mm.
once you've set a limit for yourself and you've decided, here's where my boundary is, they aren't ready for the pushback that they get from other people that want to drag them back over to make it the way it used to be.
Mm.
And so people aren't ready to protect their boundary. And that's a really important part of setting boundaries is also protecting them. So I'll give you an example with myself. I am 59 years old. I never in my life, I never drink and drive. That is just not something I will do. So if I'm going to have a glass of wine at a restaurant, it means I am not driving the car. It is a very strong boundary that I have with myself. So sometimes when I go out with friends and they're like, oh, let's have a glass of wine, but I'm driving, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. And it is a boundary with me that I am very, very protective of. And so I'm not talked out of my boundary. I'm not like, oh, we're not driving for hours. It's not a big deal. It's just something that's important to me. I have a lot. I've seen a lot in my business. I've seen a lot that happens to people when they drink and drive, and I'm not willing to take that risk with myself. So I have some boundaries that I'm really firm on, and it's really important once you have a boundary to think about how much you need to protect it. How many times do we have friends who say, they're going to start exercising and taking better care of themselves and eating carefully, but then they don't uphold it?
Yes. And I was talking to a friend recently whose wife is such a bossy pushover person. He was saying, he was giving me an example that he stood up for himself and he said no to something. It was about their family, situation. And she is one of those people who does not take no for an answer. And she will sort of, emotionally speaking, corner you and torment you and beat you up so that your no will change into a yes. So how do you suggest dealing with such difficult people who will never take no for an answer and they torment you?
Yes, I call them boundary pushers. They are extreme boundary challengers, and they really challenge us. And they are a workout. And it really does become a high conflict situation because you're having to, I always say you have to make your boundary as strong as the person that's pushing you. So if I set up just a little teeny weeny fence line boundary and I have somebody that stomps through it like an elephant, that's not a solid boundary. I need to give that person who comes racing towards me like a storming elephant, I need to put up a very strong wall.
It has to be proportionate, so to speak. But
if you're with an extreme boundary challenger, there are a couple of things that you have to be able to do. And one of them is you have to define your responsibilities and theirs. So you're always saying things like, I'm not responsible for that, you are. If you want to pick up those things from the store today, you need to go do that. I will take care of the things that I'm responsible for. So you're constantly redefining responsibilities because extreme challengers dump responsibilities on top of you all the time.
Yeah, so true. Does it mean
that's
that
one.
Does it mean that they have boundary issues themselves for setting for themselves?
Well, they are what I would call boundary blind. So they either choose not to respect your boundaries. They don't care what your boundaries are and they choose not to. Or they also don't see them. So some kind of emotional disorders make it very hard to see boundaries. So like people with attention deficit have a hard time seeing boundaries. And so they need them made more clearly because our boundaries are very invisible, right?
That's right.
A lot of our boundaries are invisible. And so you're trying to make this more visible. But if you're dealing with an extreme boundary challenger, like the woman that you described, extreme boundary challengers aren't going to change. They're not going to stop pushing you. You have to bring a lot of strength and clarity and definition to everything that you do with them. And then you have to decide how much you want to live with them, because it takes so much to uphold a boundary with them. But you're always defining your responsibilities with them. That's very important. You also give time limits to them. So you decide how long you're going to listen. to them berate you or anything else, which is, I've only got 5 minutes and then I'm walking out the door. I'll be back later. So you don't allow somebody to take all of your time and berate you, right? And the other is you do some boundaries around defining your financial responsibilities with them, because you can end up paying for things that you really can't afford. So there's a lot that goes on with extreme boundary challengers, but that's how they get their needs met in the world. They don't really meet their own needs. They get other people to meet them for them. And they also can suffer from a lot of narcissistic thinking, where they think everything is about them and they're not really considerate of what their impact is on you. And so the person that has to stand up for you is you. You're not going to change them. You just have to decide how close in you want to be with them. How much time do they get in your life? And does this work for you? Because it's very stressful to be around somebody who does that.
Yes, it takes so much emotional energy out of you just to fight back and restate your no, and no, I can't do this, and over explain and justify, and they're still come out stronger. And sometimes they bring in other people to side with them, and they influence you sort of together. I've seen that dynamic as well.
Yes.
Like
And
family members or something like that.
Yes, and it can be very hard to stand up to. But when you're doing boundary recovery work, you have to think of this as recovering your boundaries, as not realizing maybe as you started this that you're living with somebody that has some very big boundary challenges and that they are not respectful about other people's boundaries or yours. And that you can't change that. You can't make them respect you. What you can do is look at what are you willing to do to respect and take care of your own boundaries, because nobody else can do that for you.
How can someone develop this awareness or know, like, when are my boundaries need protection? When are my boundaries are being violated? How does someone know that, my boundaries are being violated? Are there any questions or any strategies, tips, or anything like that you can suggest?
I think people feel it inside. Oftentimes they get symptoms when their boundaries are being violated. So we often get physically sick from that. We get stomach pain, we get anxiety, we get depression. A lot of those symptoms are actually related to our relationship to our boundaries. And so if you're having symptoms, chronic back pain, neck pain, these kinds of things, it's really good to ask yourself, how do I feel about my boundaries? Do I feel respected? Do I feel safe? Do I feel like I am authentically listening to my truth? Or do I feel like I am always saying yes when I need to say no? Because it can also make you sick.
Yes. Yeah. For me, one of the things is I don't like when people take advantage of me, that say I'm helping them or I'm doing something for them. You give them an inch and they want a mile. So that really gets me, like it's like I feel like violated, almost abused. If I'm doing something for you wholeheartedly, that doesn't mean you can take advantage of me. And I truly feel violated.
Yes. And so that's your boundaries talking to you and saying, oh, we've just reached our limit. Say no to her. Now that you did that one favor and they're asking if now they can do 3 more things for them or just one more thing, it's really important that's where you clarify to somebody, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available to do that right now.
But usually, it creates a lot of emotion in us. Like I become angry sometimes. I'm like, how dare they? You get
Well,
Very
that's if you,
emotional.
yeah, often if you've said yes, and sometimes you can think it through, but if you were able to catch yourself in the moment and say no,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of just move along, then you won't have that story circulating in your head over and over again because, as you do more and more of this with other people, you get really comfortable and you stop circling your thoughts. That's one of the things I also think is really important in boundary work is stop circling your thoughts. Once you've said no, you're done. And
Oh,
once the thought
good.
comes, and
Yes.
when the thought comes back to me, like, oh, she shouldn't have said that, and I wished I said this, and he shouldn't have done that. As soon as that starts circling, I just say to myself, I go upstairs in my head and I just say, it's not happening right now. That moment is already done and over. We're done. I'm not going to
Yes.
waste any more time thinking about it. I'm moving into this moment.
Yes. That's such great advice.
And I just stop myself from circling because it's just such a time waster. And I give my mind something else to focus on. Like, let's go do something else. We can read a book, we can work on a project, whatever, but we're done thinking about this. It's a waste of my time.
Then you really start to doubt yourself if you circle back, and you may even change your actions and do something stupid. I feel like
Exactly. That can become a way to let doubt in the door. Good one, Anna.
I know I'm catching up. Sorry.
Mhm. Well, I say that, if you focus on boundaries
Mhm.
in your life and really start paying attention to all of this and just work with yourself, in about 2 years, you'll become a real expert at this in your life. You'll feel like you have mastered it.
Mm.
But it's not like a 1 month focus. And it's not like there's some particular set of mountains that you have to climb. It's just that in 2 years of just constantly asking yourself this question and holding yourself to your truth, like if I said yes to something and then I realized I should have said no, for example, sometimes I'll overbook my schedule to see clients and I'll start seeing people way too early in the morning or way too late at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because I'm trying to give people the time that they've asked for. But I also have to have a beginning of my day and an end. And I hold myself accountable. I call people back and I say, I am so sorry. I gave you a 7:30 at night appointment and it's really not good for me to be working that long of a day. So I need to find a better time that fits inside my schedule. And I'm really sorry I did that. But I hold myself accountable. When I say yes and I should have said no, I go back and I fix it.
Good one.
And that is really hard to do. And it's very uncomfortable. But I have also, since I've been practicing that, I get very comfortable doing that. So even if I missed it and I should have said no, and I listen to myself later, I say, is this important for you to go back and fix? And I can hear inside, like, yes, this is not something you should compromise on. And I go back and I say, look, I'm really sorry. I said yes. I need to say no.
Where do you suggest somebody start doing this boundary work? Like at low stake things, perhaps, right?
So I
Yeah.
think all boundary work begins with self-care.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I want people to ask themselves is, how am I doing on my self-care? on doing things that are fun for me, small little things that give me joy and pleasure. How am I doing with self-care? Because once you get in a habit of doing those small things, you need to, kind of practice a boundary of protecting your time so you can do that thing that you love to do. Like I love to read, I love to knit. And I love to ski, I love to swim. There are certain things I love to do, and they're part of my self-care. But you have to have time to do them. And so you begin by practicing time that you hold a boundary on and you do your self-care. And you do it every day. And once you get used to that boundary, you're only working with yourself, right? When you're doing that. Once you get used to that boundary, it starts to become more clear where your next boundary needs to be. And you work at them one at a time.
Yes. What are some great strategies for saying no politely and kindly, declining an offer or something like that, without being overly direct and offensive, but direct enough so the other person will not push over and try to,
Yeah.
convince you?
I'm sorry, I'm not available. That
Mhm.
works. I'm sorry, I'm not available. So you gotta write down a couple phrases that you memorize that you practice saying that are simple and short. The other thing is never explain why.
Mm-hmm. Why?
So when you're saying no to
Mhm.
something, never explain why. Never say because I have a haircut or because I have a dental appointment at that time. Never give your
Why?
reason.
Why is that?
Because that allows people to argue with you and go, oh, well, we can just move the time. Anna, we really want you to be part of this committee. You're not available on Tuesday mornings. But how's Thursday evening?
Oh, I hate that bargaining. Oh, how?
Yes. So once you start telling people why you can't do something, they will then start bargaining with you. So you never say why.
Okay.
Just say, I'm not available, or that's not something I'm going to be able to do. That's a no, or that just doesn't fit in for me. And then if people push and go, well, why not? You can just turn and say, that's really personal.
Oh, okay. So no one can touch that one.
That's right. That's really personal. And then there are other times when you just, when you think about how you're going to say no, if it's something that you can anticipate you're going to be asked that you want to say no to, I say to people, write it down, write your answer in 2 sentences. Practice getting your answer down to 2 sentences. So let's say somebody sent you an email and you have time to respond to that, and you're figuring out how you're going to say no. However it is that you're going to say no, don't do more than 2 sentences. And be sure that you did say no somewhere in there. Because sometimes you think you've said no and you really didn't. You just kind of left the door open like a maybe some other time.
Yes. I had that. I hate that. Yeah. It's like
maybe some other time. So I was asked to guest speak somewhere, and it was during a month where I already was doing a workshop, and I thought I'm going to be pretty tired after that 3-day workshop that I'm teaching. And then I was asked to go to Albuquerque, and I thought, oh, that sounds so nice, and it's right near Santa Fe. I'll have such a good time. But my body was like, no. You're teaching the week before. That's too much. So I just said, I'm really sorry, but that's not something I can say yes to. I'm going to say no. And I hope you get a good speaker. I know you'll find somebody else. I didn't say why. I didn't say because I'm already teaching. I didn't say, you don't have to say why to people. You just be really clear that something is a no. If you want to say why to somebody, then go ahead, but don't do it in more than a sentence. Don't give a long speech about why you're saying no.
Yes. For that, I'll give you an example. You know how telesummits are popular? These online summits are popular. They invite 20 speakers.
Oh, yes.
Because I used to do those years ago. But then in 2016, I said, you know what? I hate doing those things. It's like, my heart is not in it. I don't want to do this. And I had a hard time saying no to those things. And so I started practicing saying no. The first invitation I received, and I get so many, I crafted my message, how to say no politely.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You have to craft it. Go ahead.
And I did, because I get those invitations like every month. Oh, come speak at this summit. You are a good fit and whatever. We got your name off the internet. And I say, it sounds like a fantastic summit. I say something positive and thank you for inviting me or thinking of me. However, and I don't say but, I say however, I no longer participate in online summits. I have made a commitment to myself since 2016, and I no longer do online summits. I wish you good luck. Let me know.
Oh, that is so clear.
Is that clear?
That is so clear. And it conveys that this is a no for you. Mm-hmm. And that, because they may have seen that you used to do a summit somewhere. So that's really helpful that you say, as of this date, I have stopped doing that, because they may have like, oh, well, you did this summit and that summit. So you're bringing a lot of clarity. And you're also very firm. Like, I would understand if I read that that's a no for you.
Yes. Or sometimes people ask for free resources and things like that.
I get this same thing. Sometimes somebody asks me to participate in something and they say to me, but we want you to email, a certain number of emails to your list of people just about this summit or just about this event. And I say to people, that's a no for me. My rule of how I communicate to people that have decided to receive email from me is that I give them something that's for them every month, and it's only once a month.
Yeah, that's very clear too.
And it is for them. If somebody is taking the time to read something I've sent them, I want them to get something out of it for themselves. And then I have like weekly boundary tips, but people have to sign up for that. And they get a little weekly boundary tip that they've signed up for. Nobody's selling them anything. Nobody is asking them to sign up for something else. It is a give. And I'm really clear about what I agree to communicate to people. And so, I think you're being very clear when you say that, and it really helps to craft your messages. So if you get time to think about how you're going to say no to somebody, take time to just write a couple sentences, just the way you described, Anna. You just crafted a message and then you say it.
Yes. I think the hardest difficulty is when we're put on a spot, when people, like I have a friend recently, we were in the car together and I didn't have time to craft a message, right? I was put on the spot. She's like, we're going on a ski vacation. Why don't you join us? It's going to be so much fun. And in
immediate first answer, I'll think about it.
I said that. I said, I'll check with my husband. His schedule is always very, it's not so clear. Like as we get closer to the date, I will know better. But in my heart of hearts, I knew my answer was a no right away. But I didn't want to say no right away it's a friend, right? To offend her.
Right.
I didn't even thought about it. Like I didn't give enough time to think about it. I think it's honorable to say that if you're in a close relationship, right?
Absolutely. And it also lets people know that you've considered their request.
Yes.
There's a boundary that you've heard them and that you're considering their request.
Yes. That's a good point. And
I do think that's very helpful because people want to know that you cared and thought about it. And so you can say, I'm considering this. I'll think about it. And then whenever anything hits me that I wasn't expecting, I just say, let me think about it. Because I get that a lot from all kinds of avenues in my life. And I just know first say, let me think about it. And then I'll think about it and I'll get back to them.
Yes, that's a good point. How about technology and boundaries? People texting you at odd hours and not respecting your boundaries. What do you have to say about technology and tips maybe?
Well, first of all, I turn off my phone at 7 p.m.
Me too. So no wonder.
I'm not letting anybody else decide that for me.
No wonder I love you. So I do the same. 7 p.m. my phone goes off because I decide it, not other people. Go ahead. What else?
That's it. I turn it off and I leave on for my adult kids a way to get through where they can get through to me if there was an emergency in the family, but that's it. It's happened like once or twice a year, but nobody else can get through. And I'm very clear to people, even to my clients, and I'm a therapist. And, sometimes people say, can I call you in the middle of the night? And I say, no, you cannot. But, if you leave a message, I check them. And once I start working in the morning, I'll return your call at a reasonable hour. It's also modeling boundaries for people. And I was just away at Esalen Institute in California, and they keep the whole Wi-Fi off from 8:30 in the morning until like 9:15 at night.
Oh,
So I couldn't even be reached. I was there taking a writing class, and it was such a great practice for me because I learned I could do everything I need to do with my phone online in social media and everywhere else within 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night
mm.
when they turn the Wi-Fi back on. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I wasting my time for all day checking things?
Yes.
I can just do it once in the morning, and I can do it once at night, or, at the end of the afternoon, and I can be done with it. I can walk away from it.
Yeah, that requires a lot of self-discipline. What I have another boundary. I never text with my clients as well. Oftentimes people
There you go.
they know, my number, they call and they say, can I text you? I say, no, I do not communicate via text with my clients. So that's a big no for me too, because if they text you, then that's it. It's like they're bombarding you with a lot. Once you open the floodgate, then it's hard to put a boundary and take control over things, correct?
Yes, it is. And so you have to think about with technology what this access means.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is that you feel your responsibilities are and how you want to manage that. And it is really good to take like a digital break just to give yourself some perspective. That's what I gained when I was away and they kept the Wi-Fi off. I also don't have Wi-Fi on at my cabin office where I see clients. So I work all day without Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And you're perfectly happy, probably. You don't miss it.
I'm really happy. I don't miss it. And it's really nice to take digital breaks and to take kind of a digital detox and step away from the whole online world for a few days just to help you reset and gain perspective on what your choices are. Like you said, one of them is I'm not going to text with certain people in my life or with my clients or whatever it is. So that you can kind of reset where you need these boundaries with technology, because it is really becoming kind of you're always on 24/7 because technology is always awake.
Yes. And I feel like there was this woman, I was part of this committee at my daughter's old school. I was volunteering and one of the women was this early riser, get things done type of person. And she would text at 5 a.m., 5:30, 6 a.m. And my phone is not on yet. However, when I turn it on, I see, I'm like, wow, she texted me like 5 a.m. and she expects me to respond. Like I respond, let's say after 10, right?
Right.
and I would purposefully, even if I saw the text at 8 a.m., I would wait until 10 or after to respond.
Absolutely.
So that she will learn a lesson that, hey, I'm not available until then.
Absolutely. And she may never learn that. That may never occur to her that that's what you mean. Mm-hmm. For her, it may just be like that's the most efficient time for her to get her stuff done and then she's done. And so it may never occur to her to stop doing that. But as long as you control when your phone is on, the other thing that really I get overwhelmed by is when people bombard me with emails that are like 3 pages long. And, I just, with those people, I give them a 1-sentence answer.
Yes, that's great.
And I try to teach people, like, don't bombard me with pages and paragraphs and long, lengthy emails. Like, you're not going to get a long, lengthy novel back from me. You're just going to get a sentence. This is social media. If we're going to have a long conversation, we're going to be face to face, or we'll have a scheduled conversation. But I'm not doing those long things. Same thing with Facebook posts. When people send me a post and it's really long, it's like you get back like a little like for that. I mean, I'm not gonna have like this lengthy online conversation.
Yes. How did you get into this boundary work in the first place?
Well, I felt my life crashing around me from a lack of boundaries. I worked in nonprofits, and when you run nonprofits and work in the nonprofit sector, there are almost zero boundaries because you're always helping people and it's a profession of helping. And I've always been in that profession as a therapist or as a nonprofit director. But I realized that the whole field had no boundaries. And I realized that that was what I was needing the most, was a sense of beginning, middle, and end. It started with beginning, middle, and end. Then it went to I needed to have some yeses and nos. And for a year, I carried little no's written on cards. It just said no. I had like 50 of them in my pockets, taped to my computer, on my phone to remind me to say no. And then as I got stronger in saying no, I started writing about the process that I was going through. And then I started teaching the process with my clients. Almost anybody that comes to therapy, at the heart of it is starting to work on their yeses and nos. And so I started looking at which process helps people the most and which process I was using wasn't so helpful. It's the great thing about living in a small community is I hear from people in the grocery store, hey, that thing we worked really helped, or that thing we did together didn't help at all. So I got feedback and I just kept track, and I realized I made a map in my head of how to teach boundary skills. And then one day somebody asked me to speak in a theater and share what was the heart of my work. And I felt like it was all about my journey with boundaries. And I felt like this makes the most difference for people. This helps people. And that's really the heart of my work, is what helps. And I also think that in the big picture, Anna, this is what's wrong with our world, is this incredible lack of understanding about boundaries.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Where can the listener find you online?
So I have a website, sarrigilman.com, SarriGilman.com. And I have a book that's available anywhere in any bookstore or online. It's called Transform Your Boundaries. The book has questions in it where you can dig out your boundaries. So it helps people to really get through the process of working out their own boundaries. And I've received letters from all over the world, people using the book to dig out their boundaries, and that it makes a really big difference. So you can find me online. I do one workshop once a year that's open to anybody to come in, and we do 3 days of boundary immersion and boundary recovery. It's coming up March 6 to 8 on Whidbey Island. So there's information about that on my website. And then most of the rest of the year, I'm brought into places where I do private workshops and teachings. But the book really helps. And once a year, there's an open come to it workshop.
Yeah. I'm thinking now, I organized the Authentic Parenting Conference in 2019. And we brought together the listeners of the podcast, and it was an amazing event. And now you are making me think, maybe I should invite Sarri to the conferences.
Oh my gosh!
I would be. It would be.
So how was that for people to meet each other as listeners?
It was fantastic. People made friends. I was moved and touched. I was crying the whole day. Meeting the real listeners in real life. Like you do the podcast, that's so vague and abstract, but when people poured in, I'm like, wow, these are real people. It was the best one.
That is awesome, Anna.
That was one of the best days of my life, and people flew from around the country to come.
Oh my God, Anna!
It was something else. It was like a dream, and it went so great. We had amazing talks and art and music, lovely. So I am thinking of doing the 2020, maybe in October. So I have to figure out when I want to do and how I want to do and the theme and everything. But I'm going to keep you in mind.
Oh, keep me in mind. That sounds really fun.
Yes. So thank you so much for your time, for your presence, for the work that you do.
It was great to connect with you, Anna, and to your audience. And I hope this is helpful and gives people a place to start. And I look forward to hearing from people on how it works for them.
I will keep you posted.
Take good care.
And thank you for saying yes to my invitation.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Okay. You take good care and Happy New Year.
Same to you, Sarri. Bye-bye. And that is it, my dear listener, for this episode of the Authentic Parenting Podcast. I would love to hear your takeaways and stories about boundary setting. I am positive you've got some stories. Let's continue the conversation in our private Facebook group. For show notes, contact info, to sign up for the on-air coaching calls, or to work with me, visit authenticparenting.com. Are you enjoying the podcast? If you do, I would appreciate a review on Apple Podcasts. And FYI, when you review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, the review goes towards the show, not for a particular episode. If you have something specific to say about the guest, about the topic, if you have a question, a parenting question that you would like to be answered on our special episodes, please get in touch with me. My email is info@authenticparenting.com. Leave a voicemail. Call the number 732-763-2576, and I will respond to you, and I will definitely respond to you with my audio reply. Follow me on Instagram, the only social media platform I use and somewhat enjoy. My username is authentic.parenting.podcast, and I'm pretty active on there. And we do book giveaways, and I show my baking and cooking skills. So follow me to get the inside scoop of Anna Sewell's life. Of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show, rate and review it on Apple Podcasts. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Sewell. Thank you so much for listening.